Welcome to the Lou&Sue podcast,
where we chat about life, love, and what we've learned.
So grab your cutest mug
and join us.
Hi, welcome to the Lou&Sue podcast. Today's episode is money.
Financial advice at any age. And we have our first guest. We should put in some fake applause right here.
Yeah.
That would give you an applause track.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for coming. We're kind of, I don't know, this is fun. I'm nervous.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the first time we recorded the podcast.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's uncharted territory. This is Mitch. He works for Discovery Financial Services. What's your official title? You're a financial guru?
Financial advisor.
Oh,
You
well, that's
talk people off cliffs sometimes, therapist.
Yeah. He's been my therapist. When I was telling Mitch, when COVID hit, I'm a barber, so I couldn't work. Probably for, I think it was 10 weeks was the first shutdown, and I had basically enough money in my savings to last about 3 months. And that was this was before we found out there was any CERB. So I was a little panicked. Luckily there was CERB and I made it okay, but it was a bit of a wake up call for me. I was 40 years old. That was 5 years ago, wow. And I realized I needed to do something about it. So once we got back to work, I think I was cutting your hair and I found out what you did.
Yeah. And
invited you to tell me what to do with my money. So your cat has the pen.
Okay, I'm gonna grab a pen and then we'll come back.
I don't need the pen.
Well, that hasn't happened before.
He's stolen pens before, but never on camera.
You can totally leave that in too.
I'm gonna leave that in.
All right. So I sent you a few questions to give us sort of a broad overview of I guess in high school and stuff, we don't really learn about finances. And I know myself, I was married for 13 years, but he was kind of the financial guy. So I really didn't know anything when I came to you about finances.
Yeah.
So how did you get interested in it? First of all, let's figure
I took some university courses and everything, and then just a bunch of naive young adults. I didn't know what I was going to do when I entered the workforce and kind of got introduced to what this was and realized that, I can make a living and help people along the way. Mm-hmm. And it kind of organically grew in that fashion that, I really enjoyed it and understand it. And like I said, I'm able to help lots of different people in different ways.
You've been doing it for how long?
15 years.
Ooh.
I had hair when I started.
Did you? Did that ruin it for you?
No.
That's, yeah. So what is your number one, I guess, piece of financial advice? If somebody's coming to you for the first time, I guess you'd have to find out where they're at already first.
So I always tell people when you're looking for a financial planner, and you should work with a financial planner. I know there's lots of ads out there of doing it on yourself and everything, but by working with someone, it's a behavioral thing that it kind of ingrains you in the idea that to set more money aside. You do annual reviews and different things like that, and you're like, well, Mitchell's coming to the house today. Mm-hmm. Did I miss that $300 a month going into my bank account? Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll up it to $400. We see lots of people that started an account, didn't get any help along the way, and the same $50 they started with 15 years ago, they're still putting that $50 a month away. Mm-hmm. So when I meet people, I tell them, find somebody that you can trust, that's knowledgeable, and that has integrity.
Yeah.
If you can build that relationship, make sure that they're doing the proper planning and things like that for you, they have your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
And that will lead to the success that you need.
I can attest to that for sure, because I found, you knew what was going on in my life. So when I was getting married, you were helping me to kind of focus on what's the best way I can save for the wedding, but still saving on the side, and to break that up and sort of diversify my savings that way. Because you were talking to me about, your immediate need versus your medium term versus long term goals.
Yeah, you always have to link it to a goal. You can't invest money aggressively if you need it in the next year or two.
Yeah.
Because then you have an awkward conversation that, I was aiming to have this amount of money here for this goal, and now it's not all there because of market downturns or things like that. We can't time that stuff perfectly. So
yeah, and you also told me not to look at it every day.
that's a big thing. Like, there's two types of investors. You have the ones that get their statements, they look, okay, it's positive, put it through the shredder, and then you have people that kind of
log in every day. I
lost X amount of dollars yesterday, made this much today. And that'll drive you crazy.
You have to talk yourself down off the ledge a little bit that way too, because it does fluctuate and it is a long-term thing. And I know you were saying that during COVID, some people did panic a little bit too. And you have to be like, okay,
And that's why when you're working with somebody that you can trust, and the goals and everything, you can protect against that. Like I said, if you need money in the next year or two, you can't be invested fully in the market. Or that could play out really bad for you. So having portions of your money that, it's not going to make 10%, but maybe it makes 2, 3, 4%, but it's there when the time comes. So.
Would you say that most people are high risk that come to you, or low risk?
Honestly, you never know until somebody walks through the door, and there's no rhyme or reason. I can have a 20-year-old come into my office and not like risk whatsoever, and I have a 70-year-old that comes in and is asking what the highest volatility he can get is. And
really,
sometimes it's us doing a little bit of the training to, you're not going to use this money for 40 years. You can take on the ups and the downs, and in the long run, that's going to pay out a lot more. And then talking people down the other side of, what's your time horizon on this? Like, we don't want to be having a conversation where, you take 2008 and the market was down 40%.
Yeah. That was the crash, right?
The financial crash. And, we've had dips and everything since then, but nothing of that sort. And there's nothing that says that can't happen again.
No, I remember my boss telling me that mortgage rates, I think it was in the 70s or the 80s, they went up to something ridiculous like 17-18%. And people were just walking into the bank and dropping their keys off. I don't know if he was being like sarcastic, but it got really bad.
I've heard, so I'm a finance manager at a dealership, so how a lot of people say, okay, well, interest rates aren't quite going down then. They're like, yeah, well, it was double this or triple this back in whatever day. And I'm like, really? I didn't even really pay attention to that before, but it's, it's crazy. I'm glad I wasn't trying to borrow anything at that time. But I feel like people borrow more now than they ever did then, like the generation. I think we are more used to living in debt than maybe.
I would agree. Like, we tend to want to spend our money a lot more. Like the baby boomers, they grew up with nothing, so they saved everything they could. And nowadays, it is hard out there, so people kind of get frustrating with the idea of saving for, retirement or future stuff, so they spend it all now. And
there's got to be a balance there though, right? You got to put some away. My dad always used to say, pay yourself first. So you take 10% off the top of whatever you get, and that's your sort of mad money, your allowance, and then everything else, But if you do it first, then you feel like you've got that excitement of.
That's kind of some great advice, because I know I've used that with, especially young people that come into my office for the first time. It's, okay, you got to pay for what you did yesterday. Pay off that debt, things like that. Most people want to enjoy the rest of it today. Well, like you said, pay yourself first, take it right off the top, that 10, 15%. You're probably not going to miss it,
Mhm.
but you're going to sure enjoy it later on.
Absolutely. And I think too, when it comes to savings, I know the thing that helps me is it coming out of my account directly as like a bill. So like that way, because if I have access to something, I'm an immediate gratification person. If I can see that balance, if my investments were connected to my bank account, I would touch it more often. I would be able to take it out. So one of the things I like investing with you is that I can see it, I can log into the account, but I can't just take money out whenever I feel like it. And I think that's a safety.
Yeah, the having to call somebody and like, okay, you know what, I need X amount of dollars, it kind of takes those spur of the moment purchases away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And also if you have to take the money and transfer it into that account, it's less likely to happen.
might not
Just
do it.
automatically take it out, because if I don't think about it,
Yeah.
it's good. It's there.
Yeah, so like, I don't know if you can even answer this but this is the first question I thought of. I was like, so if I was 20 years old and I put, let's say $20 a week away, do you know what I would have at like 65?
It's not the question.
No, okay, what was the question I asked you?
Let me
How
go
did I
calculator
word
out.
that?
So you asked me $100 a week
Oh, $100. Oh, I was thinking big.
for 45 years. I turned it around of like, what happens if you put $400 a month away? Most people don't get paid weekly.
Right, yeah.
And bi-weekly, it's just easier to do it monthly. So I did $400 a month
Yeah.
for 40 years, assuming 7% rate of return. That with compound interest and everything is going to grow to $992,000.
So you're a millionaire.
Yeah, if you start early.
So $100. Okay. I'm a simplistic person. $100 a week in my head. I know they don't get paid that way, but that's the question for most people is like, what would I have when I retire if I did X, Y, Z? So, and I think that if you break it down small, then it seems so much more like, you know, that you always hear people say, oh, for the price of a cup of coffee a day, you know?
Yeah, and I used to have a really great graph that I would show people, and it's like, okay, what happens if I put away $200 a month for 20 years compared to I wait 20 years and then put $400 a month away? Still putting the same amount over, you know, the 20 and 40 years. The person that started early because of compound interest has like an extra $100,000.
Yeah. Well, and I remember kind of, I wouldn't say I broke down in your office, but I definitely had that moment of like, why didn't I start this earlier? And I remember you saying to me like, well, you can't think like that, you know, because that time's gone. Like, let's not live in the past and think about the fact that you're starting now as opposed to in 10 years or whatever.
Yeah. So Susan in 10 years would be like, I'm so glad I started 10 years ago instead of starting now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was grateful for that and that advice too, because it's easy to get stuck in the I wish.
Yeah.
But that's why we should be teaching kids about this in high school.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and like I wish I had the time to go sit at a high school and you know, educate them on, you know, good debt, bad debt, starting early, all those different things. But
Well, this is the next best thing.
Yeah, yeah. They have to watch our podcast now.
Watch our podcast.
Or listen to it. So what is good debt, bad debt? What's the...
well, you know, credit card debt at 19%, you know.
Bad debt.
Bad debt, yeah.
You know, student loans that, well, right now there's no interest on Canadian student loans, but like even a student loan, you borrowed money to be able to get a career that is hopefully going to be able to pay you more
So
in
it's
the
a
long
return
run.
on investment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Good debt.
That's a good debt,
Good
you know.
Mortgage?
Most people don't buy their house in cash, so you know you have to mortgage it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
hopefully you're at a 2, 3, 4%.
What is it at
Right.
now? It's like 3 point something, isn't it?
Yeah, probably around 3.5 to 4%.
It's better now than it was, I know.
Yeah.
So a lot of people nowadays are saying things like, I might as well just rent because the price of housing and everything, I mean, I know rent is expensive too, but you don't have the fix-ups, you don't like, do you have I guess an opinion on that, renting versus owning a house? Or
I think it's a really hard time because, you know, you take the average house probably is around 300,000. I might be completely off on that number, but you know, when I bought a house 10 years ago, it was 150,000.
Yeah.
So you're twice as much for the exact same house. So that makes it really hard. And you know, the whole rent versus own debate, you got to factor in things like, you know, are you all right with doing maintenance around the house? Or are you all right with, you know, things are going to break and you're going to have to pay for them, different things like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that has to be factored into it. I think affordability, probably at the end of the day, with what the prices of rent and things are these days, you are probably still better off buying because you're getting an asset. But my gosh, it's quite expensive there. Like, you know, I found that, you know, if you have one income, it's really hard.
Yeah.
You almost have to have two incomes. So.
I think the days of a single person, unless they've got a really good job buying a house on their own, those are gone.
Well, even a really good job, you know, a lot of their money is now going into that house and nowhere else.
And if they get out of university and they've got, you know, 5 to 10 years of student loans left to pay off, and they've got a car and they've got, like, it adds up fast. And never mind wanting to go on vacation or have, you know,
any of that
a
stuff.
boat or a
especially if you're newly graduated, a lot of people, there's going to be a wedding probably around that time too. I mean, I waited a while before I got married, but still, like, there's other things that you need to pay for. You can't just be, okay, I'm going to go without just so I can buy this house. Like, that's not how anybody lives.
And I guess on a scale, a wedding would be considered bad debt.
Yeah.
Right?
In my situation,
depends if you make the spouse happy.
That's true. That's very true. You have to factor all those things in.
Exactly.
Right? So how much, like, so I asked this question about how much of your income should you put away, and I know you said, like, it depends how much you can put away.
Yeah, so, like, that's a really hard one because some people don't need to put as much away because they can live off of less or different things like that. But my rule of thumb on it is, you know, if I was to go get a job, you know, a nice group retirement, group pension plan, I'm going to put 5%, they're going to put 5% in. So, you know, like, let's look at 10% as what I want to do as a minimum. Obviously, there's going to be people that can't put 10% or don't want to put 10% away. The more you put away, the more options you have later on.
Yeah.
So, you know, you take RSPs, the government says you can put 18% of your income into RSPs.
Yeah.
You know, you can max out tax-free savings accounts, different things like that, if you have all those means and everything. But, you know, my rule of thumb is, like, let's try to aim for that 10% kind of thing.
Yeah. And you still, like, while you're young, you still want to be able to travel and do things like that, because when you do retire, if you've got all this money saved, that's wonderful, but maybe you don't have the health to travel or do those things. So
like, I have the RSP match with my work, but, like, you don't have that option.
No.
So for somebody like me, I'm gonna take advantage of the match, right? I'm gonna invest in the RSPs. But for somebody who doesn't have that at work, because a lot of people don't have that at work, do you think RSPs are better than TSFA? TSAs, okay, I got it right. Probably depending on the age, right?
Well, it's I find both tend to get used at the wrong time sometimes. You really have to look at the person's situation. You know, ideally, you're putting into an RSP when you're in your highest tax bracket. Well, if you're 25 years old coming out of school, likely you're going to get into a higher tax bracket later on. So I'd rather get more money when I put the RSP in later on. Or if I'm not in a high tax bracket, do I really need that tax break from the RSP, or do I just want to put in a tax-free savings account so that, you know, when I do go to take it out, it doesn't have to be short-term money, it can be long-term money, but when I take it out, I don't have to worry about the tax implications. So it's figuring out what is correct for the certain person. A lot of times it's a match of both, you know, a little bit of tax-free, a little bit of RSP, but you also have to link the goal. Like, if we're talking retirement, those are two good options. If I'm talking about short-term savings, obviously you're looking at a tax-free savings account or something. I find, but a lot of times with those tax-free savings accounts, they kind of did a bad job when they introduce them by calling it an account, because people just kind of think of it as like a bank account.
I did.
They
I
put
thought it
money
was just
in there.
sitting there.
They earn 1% interest on it, never invested or get really any growth on it. And they use it like their day-to-day bank account. Oh, you know, I want to do this. I'm going to take $500 out. I'm going to, you know, rather than let it sit in there and grow kind of things.
And then you can like within that diversify and have some that are a little more aggressive and some that are a little safer in the investments, like in the TSFAs.
Yeah, you should always kind of link what you're doing on an investment side to a certain goal. You know, if my goal is I'm going to get married in 2 years and I need to have $15,000 there, we can't take on risk.
Yeah.
If it's retirement, you can weather the ups and downs and things like that, and you're going to be in a much better place. You're not having this awkward conversation of, okay, my money's not worth as much as what I put it in.
And again, that's where it, like, you getting to know your client is so important, because that's exactly what I did. I had a wedding coming up. I wanted to buy a house. I'm saving for my daughter's university. I think I had like 5 or 6 things that I told you. And you were like, okay, I got this. And then you kind of do that for me. So it takes especially as somebody who doesn't understand how all that works, it takes the guesswork out for me. And I know that it's safe and I can see it growing, even though I shouldn't check it every day. You know, yeah. You also sell life insurance though, as well, right?
Yes.
So what do you, like, at what age, like what necessitates somebody buying life insurance usually?
So there's a couple different types of life insurance too. Like, you know, you have your permanent insurance that, you know, ideally you're gonna need coverage forever. It's usually a lower amount. Then you have term insurance, which is kind of like a temporary need that I know when I have a house, kids, different things like that, that I'm responsible, or that, you know, I want to pay off my house if something happens to me. I want to make sure my kids are taken care of while they're in the house if something happens to me.
Yeah.
So it's need is what facilitates it. Is, okay, you take a permanent need, you're probably going to need that forever. So start it as soon as you can if you think you're going to need it. Because the younger you are, the cheaper it is, and hopefully you're insurable. You might not be insurable later on when you actually decide that you need it.
Yeah.
Term insurance, you know, it's a big amount. You know, you do a full needs analysis on it and you get quite shocked that maybe you need $500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million worth of coverage to cover, you know, salaries and mortgages and things like that.
Yeah.
It's trying to figure out what that exact number is when you do it the first time, so that you don't have to.
Yeah, I just had that conversation with my husband today. I told him I was going to go get some more life insurance, and I think he was a little kind of, you have life insurance on me through my work, and I said, yeah, but think about it. If you died tomorrow, not only do I want to be able to pay off the house so I don't have that hanging over me by myself, but, you know, I'm 45 and we would have been married for what, another 25 years potentially, and there's no second income anymore. So it's all of those things that you wouldn't necessarily think about that are going to come up, where I don't want to have to worry about that again. You know, you get used to having a second income and it's not there anymore.
Well, and it kind of, we do all this planning for retirement and different things like that. Well, you take something like that, if that happens, that derails the retirement completely, because you know, you're banking on the fact that your spouse is going to put X amount of dollars away too, and it's part of the family retirement plan. So,
and that I'm going to have his CPP as well as mine, and his, you know, that there's 2 of everything. So even if we were mortgage free, that there'd be more money coming in that's not there anymore. So, you know, it's one of those things people get really morbid about. They don't want to.
It's not a comfortable conversation.
No, but it's the reality.
And it's like I say in my line of work all the time too. It's better to have it and not need it than the other way around. Because if you don't have it and you need it, you're not having a good time at all.
Yeah. Well, that's the quote that we got. It's you'll either learn to manage money, or the lack of it will manage you. So, you know, you have, like, what's your best piece of financial advice let's say at 20 versus 40 versus 60? Like, where would you start somebody, you know?
So 20, 25-year-old, start. Just get out there, talk to your parents' person, talk to whoever in the industry will help you out, and just start putting money aside. Figure out what is good debt, bad debt. Be smart with your money. You know, way too often we see people get in these big amounts of debt early on in their life, and they're forever trying to get out of this $10,000 line of credit, and you know, take 10 years to pay that off, and then they're 35 starting off rather than 25.
Yeah.
So it's just get out there and do it. Talk to somebody and see if they'll take you on as a client, and start building wealth now.
Okay.
You take 40 years old,
Thanks.
really start to look at the retirement planning and the you know, the future of, okay, what's it look like with what I have now and what I'm doing? Where's that put me? What do I need to do different? And start with the planning side of it. You know, you've built some wealth hopefully at this point. Making sure that it's set up properly and going to do what you want to do. And then when you get to 60, that's the big crunch of, okay, what does retirement look like? You know, my clients that are gearing up for retirement, we're doing retirement plans every single year to make sure that they're on track and that retirement's going to be what they want and what they're going to have for health and dental coverage when they're done, and really getting their ducks in a row.
Yeah. Sometimes at 60, do you find that they end up having to delay their retirement a little bit? Like, whether it's for coverage for their medicines or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it certainly does happen that, you know, you take an individual health and dental plan, it's probably $400 at least for a family. Or I'm getting it through work and it's a couple $100, so they delay it in that aspect, or they know because of that medical that maybe retirement's going to be a little bit harder because of that. So.
And maybe what they could have survived on when they first started planning it, those numbers, because inflation don't really work anymore. Like, I know I have a lot of clients that retire and then they end up going back to work, even part-time, because it's just the money just doesn't stretch as far as they thought it was going to.
Yeah, and sometimes that's kind of like, we always do retirement planning and everything, and we continue to do it right through retirement. Because, like, let's say you retire at 60, 65, we have you into the office, like, okay, well, we wanted to make sure that we were taking out X amount per year and we were going to be all right. Obviously things change with rates of return and things like that. But it's, are we on the progress that we had said that we were? Did you spend more than you thought you were gonna? Did you not? Did you take everything out and put it into GICs because you thought that you couldn't invest through retirement? There's a lot of different factors in there that sometimes people end up running out of money in retirement because of that. Sometimes it's just boredom too. You know,
that is probably 50% of the time.
They say that they went back for the fact that they couldn't afford it, but they just got bored and wanted to do something
or
different.
their wives get annoyed and send them out. That does happen.
That probably happens a lot too.
You're in the house too much. Go do something. Go golf. So, if you were at a high school right now, other than telling them just to start, what do you like? What would be your piece of advice? What is it that you would tell your kids? You know,
be very careful with like the credit cards and things like that. Like, you know, I went to university. You walk in the first day and there's MasterCard there. What can I sell all the kids $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 limit credit card? That can spiral real quick when you're a young adult and you don't think of like, okay, I don't pay this, I ruin my credit, and then I can't buy a house, and I'm paying 20% for a vehicle rather than what, you know, 5% like other people are. And it's just kind of like some of that basic stuff of, yeah, you want to build good credit and you want to make sure that you don't screw it up.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, because I've had people that you're like, oh, I don't take loans, I don't credit cards and this and that, but they wanted to buy something and it's like, well, the bank won't give you anything because you have zero credit.
Yeah.
So it's still good to have credit, but then you still have to do it. You have to do the smart way. Don't do the 25% credit cards that you don't end up paying. Get a, maybe when you buy your vehicle, you get a good rate for your vehicle, and then as you're paying that helps your credit. And
it's like when you're first establishing credit, have a phone bill in your name, have a credit card with a limit on it that you're gonna
$500 maybe.
I remember,
just make sure you always pay it off every month.
Like I remember when I was much younger, getting a credit card. She said, you buy something, you go home and you put the money on it.
Yeah.
Well,
isn't there something called a guaranteed credit card or something where you put the money on first?
Yeah.
But it's like
it's like a debit card.
Yeah, it builds up your credit, but it's you're not going to get into too much debt or into too much trouble. And I mean, there's certain things you need a credit card for, whether it's booking a trip.
We
or
do
whatever,
everything online now too. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a credit card, a lot of things you can't book or you can't purchase or.
My number one piece of advice is don't have your credit card attached to everything on your phone, because it is so impulsive and easy for me to like Amazon. Yep, I want that book. Yep, and like it's instantaneous, and because it's on there. But if I had to go get my wallet and enter my information, I would probably think about it long enough to go, I really don't need that.
Like you think a little bit before you contact your TFSA guy and you're like, hey, I want some money. You'll be like, well, what for? Well, never mind. Never mind, I don't really need it
that's true though, because I would never call you and be like, there's this really nice purse and I wouldn't do that. So that I
takes
guess,
the spur of the moment stuff out. I kind of like that. Like
Although I have several savings accounts attached to my bank account, and some of them are dog-eared for stuff like that. Like if I want to buy clothing, I save so much every shift or whatever that it's a very small amount. But at the end of the month, it's enough if I needed a pair of jeans then. And then that way I'm not just digging in and digging in and digging in. I know that this is how much I have. Do I really need the jeans or do I really need a winter jacket right now? So compartmentalizing your money helps you to see where it's going a little bit better. And I think about watching my mom balance her checkbook when I was a kid, which we don't do anymore. But it kept you so honest because you had to sit down and literally debit and credit.
Be an accountant.
And everybody did it. And I wonder, I should ask her this actually, if she learned to do that in high school or if that was how that worked. And when did that stop? When we get debit cards, I guess. So probably, right?
I learned accounting in high school, but I didn't really know how to apply it.
Like personal finances.
Yeah. But it was different. Like actual accounting and personal finances, they weren't together. They would have been completely separate. We never got a personal finance course of any sort. And that's, I think, what we're talking about. It'd be nice if we had that. But even knowing accounting, knowing what, how to do a ledger and how to do all that stuff doesn't really help you unless you really know how to apply it to your own finances. We're not always the best at doing our own stuff, just like anything, like mechanics. They don't want to work on their own cars. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, I know, but it's not always easy to actually.
But I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And it's easier to bury your head in the sand too. Like sometimes it's scary to actually look at the numbers. But you're never going to get anywhere unless you actually do, right? So I don't know. That's why it's nice to have somebody who knows what they're talking about. Yeah, that's you, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty well all we had for questions. Did you have any closing things that you wanted to?
No, it's like I said, it's important for people to get out there and create that behavior of setting money aside. Like you said, paying yourself first, so that you have options later on.
Yeah.
I always look at the compound interest and everything. And it's like, okay, if you set this money aside and let's say there's $250,000, $500,000 there when you go to retire. Are you gonna kick yourself in the butt that you have that money?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to regret calling you when I turn 40.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to dwell on the fact I didn't do it at 20.
No, because you started. We
That's
just
right.
to start. And it's like anything, it's consistency. And we've talked about, like, we had to start the podcast at some point. Now we have, you know.
We have guests.
We have a guest now. We
That's
moved
exciting.
along.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have, like, I think this is episode number 14. So
This might be lucky number 13.
I don't think so. I think the
Oh,
last
it's
one was.
14, sorry.
Either way, we had to start
Yeah.
somewhere. And then it's the same thing with saving money. You have to start somewhere. Once you start, then it'll keep snowballing in the right way.
Yeah.
And that's what you want.
And if you have more questions, then you can call Mitch.
Yeah.
At like midnight.
Yeah.
Here's his personal cell phone.
Yes. We'll tag that below. Do you want to ask him the question? I don't know if you guys watched the episode where we talked about our love of Friends, and if we ever had a guest on, we were going to ask them a question.
And we did not forget.
And we didn't forget, so here we go.
So we're gonna start with the male characters, right?
Yeah.
So of Chandler, Joey, or Ross, which one do you relate to the most? Which one do you think is more you?
I'd like to say Chandler. You know, dressed in a dress shirt most days. Not many people knew what he did for work.
Nobody really knows what you
nobody
do.
got it. Yeah.
I think I'm funny. I'm not.
You can be. You
Yeah.
have your moments.
Yeah, I would go Chandler.
Chandler, good.
And then, so who would you, of the girls, Rachel, Monica, and Phoebe, who would you date, who would you marry, and who would be your best friend?
This is assuming that
Pretend
he was.
you're not
Pretend he's
married.
single. Okay, he's not single. Ladies. Okay, go ahead.
Hard one. I would say probably date Rachel. I think best friends with Phoebe. I think she's a little too quirky for me long term. And I would say marry Monica. Yeah,
Your house would be clean all the time.
Yeah,
exactly.
she's a good cook.
Good cook.
Yeah.
And it kind of
Very
works out because she
precise.
ended up marrying
Yeah,
Chandler. So look
exactly.
at that.
Oh.
Right? Look at that
Nice
works
little
out.
package.
So who is your wife most like?
Monica.
There you go.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
there
think
you
that's
go.
kind of why I.
There you
You're
go.
each other's lobster.
Exactly.
Lobster. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks
out.
for having me.
Thank you
Thanks
being
for,
our
you know,
guest.
bringing this topic awareness. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's
Absolutely.
something that people don't generally like to talk about. And,
But it's important to talk about.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Well, from us to you.
Keep growing and glowing.
Thank you so much
Bye.
for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, whatever platform you're on, please follow and rate us. It helps us out. Also follow us on our social media at Lou&Sue Podcast on both Instagram and TikTok. Till next week.